Good morning. Good to have you with us on a Friday. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is off this morning. We begin our show with the ongoing financial turmoil brought on by President Trump's back-and-forth trade war with China. This morning, Beijing says it's increasing its tariffs on U.S. imports to 125%. That's after the Trump administration upped its levies on China to 145% on Thursday. So here's where we stand on U.S. tariffs currently in place following a week of walkbacks and escalations. In addition to those duties on China, there's also a 25% tariff on aluminum, autos, and goods from Canada and Mexico that are not under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. On top of that, we have a 10% baseline tariff on all other imports. The trade tensions are taking their toll on the financial markets. U.S. stocks closed sharply lower yesterday. That pretty much extinguished the relief rally seen on Wednesday after the president announced a 90-day freeze on U.S. tariffs for dozens of countries. Despite the market turmoil, President Trump says he is confident and optimistic about his tariff tactics. In a few moments, we'll hear from Investopedia's editor-in-chief, Caleb Silver. First, let's go to NBC News Washington correspondent Alice Barr. Alice, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. This week's Wall Street whiplash is really highlighting the damage that uncertainty can do to the economy, as we're seeing China again retaliate this morning with even higher tariffs on U.S. goods and a quickly escalating trade war. A wild week on Wall Street, winding down with another downturn on Thursday, erasing part of Wednesday's historic recovery as investors eye the growing trade war with China. China this morning announcing even higher 125% retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. President Trump with his cabinet acknowledging what he calls short-term pain.
There'll always be transition difficulty.
While insisting negotiations are going well with other trading partners who got a 90-day reprieve in punishing tariffs and suggesting China could follow.
I think that we'll end up working out something that's very good for both countries.
No sign of that yet, with the White House clarifying total tariffs on Chinese imports are now 145%, including a previous fentanyl-related penalty. The rift in that critical trade relationship set to drive up prices as small businesses, like this Utah hobby shop and its customers, brace for impact.
I'm a little nervous that I'm not going to get some of the product I ordered or I'm going to have to pay more for stuff.
The instability making market forecasters like J.P. Morgan Chase stick with predictions that the U.S. economy could tip into a recession. And we did get some good news for the economy with a new report showing inflation cooled in March from the month before, more than expected, though that data comes from before the trade war really started ratcheting up, with economists expecting prices, again, are going to be forced back up. Joe.
All right, Alice, thank you so much. Let's continue this conversation with Investopedia's Caleb Silver. Okay, so we got 125% one way, 145% another way. How high can we go? Have you seen anything like this before?
No, this is about as high as we've gone. And now the effective tariff rate is north of 20%, really, for the U.S. bringing in all products into this country. And with China, it can just keep getting higher and higher. We are one another's biggest customers, and now we're in a full-blown trade war. We trade about $552 billion worth of goods. China calling this a total joke, and they can say they can last as long as they want, raising tariffs or having this tariff war with the U.S. But ultimately, who pays the price? Consumers pay the price. Small businesses pay the price. We just saw in that package right there. So this is already going to escalate prices and escalate uncertainty. Uncertainty is not good for the economy.
And the question that consumers have is, how does this impact me? I mean, where are they going to see this? How quickly could they start to see higher prices?
Yeah, almost immediately next week with China, because it's going to be in consumer electronics, where we do a lot of imports, obviously some metals between the two countries, but we get a lot of apparel out of China as well. So you're talking about footwear, you're talking about clothing, but just think about the iPhone. Apple's been trying to move production to places like India. It's super hard to do that when you're working at that type of scale and you're getting those type of profit margins. So every consumer electronics product that comes from China or any component is going to get costlier here. And then for those businesses that sell to China, a lot of farmers, soy and other products, those are going to get more expensive on the way out. Really, nobody wins in the trade war.
Let's talk about the markets. We saw this rebound on Wednesday, and that was pretty much erased yesterday. What happened yesterday? Was it reality setting in, and is this volatility here to stay right now?
Yeah, it's here for now, and I would expect more and more of it. Even looking at a higher open this morning for stocks, I don't expect that to last, where I expect a lot of choppiness, because investors just can't see the future, and I don't think they believe the narrative so much. There was that relief rally, the president lowering those tariff rates to 10%. That gave people some enthusiasm, but the uncertainty with China, which is one of our biggest trading partners, that just muddies the picture here. So investors are just not certain how to value stocks right now. So what do? They sell. We heard from JP Morgan this morning, their reported earnings, the CEO saying, we are in a period of real economic uncertainty, and they're predicting a high percentage for a recession.
So when I was just going to ask that, when you weigh the 90-day pause with most countries, but then the escalation with China, what are the fears right now of a recession? Where does that stand?
The fear is psychological, and it's also real because companies can't order the right amount of inventory. They can't plan for the future. We heard Delta Airlines earlier this week saying we cannot even give a forecast for what this quarter looks like or beyond because we just don't know if people are going to be spending on travel like they used to. So take Delta, but boil that all the way down to a small business or even an auto manufacturer. Visibility is they don't have it. So if they can't see the future and make their plans, consumers are also going to put their hands in their pockets because they can't make their plans either.
Are there signs that that's happening? Are people pulling back on spending yet? I mean, what is your best recommendation for people right now who are anxious and are worried about how to navigate all this volatility?
Yeah, focus on the needs. I mean, the wants are great, but it's the needs that we need to be prepared for, and that means we can expect higher prices. We did have a more moderate inflation report yesterday, but that's looking back. Going forward, prices are going to go up. So brace yourself for that and make sure in your financial plan, you know prices are going to go up and you know the market's going to be volatile going forward. You got to be patient through this because we are in the early days of this new economic policy that is still playing out.
All right, Caleb Silver, thank you so much. An investigation is underway into a deadly helicopter crash here in New York City. A video shared on social media shows the moment when that helicopter on a tourist flight crashed into the Hudson River yesterday afternoon between Manhattan and New Jersey. The helicopter lost control shortly after it turned at the George Washington Bridge to fly along the New Jersey shoreline. All 6 people on board, including 3 children, died in the crash. Officials described the recovery efforts.
NYPD divers pulled 4 people from the crash site, and FDNY divers recovered an additional 2. Immediate life-saving measures were undertaken on the vessels at the scene, as well as the adjoining pier.
2 of the adult victims are confirmed to have been a married couple from Spain. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has the latest from the scene.
Joe, good morning. First, the NTSB and the FAA are going to be out here investigating. We don't know yet what caused this crash. Here's what I can tell you. I interviewed the man, Bruce Wall, who captured that video of the helicopter plunging into the Hudson River yesterday afternoon behind me. The way that he described it was as if something was just breaking. He said that the tail appeared to snap and that the rotor blades also detached from the plane, that they were just spinning around as the helicopter plunged into the water first, then the other parts. So something catastrophic clearly malfunctioned. We just don't know what yet. And the New York Police Department and investigators yesterday said this is going to be an ongoing investigation. Clearly, it could be weeks or months to come before we get some resolution. Here's what we do know. This was a sightseeing helicopter, much like you would see, honestly, tens of dozens of times a day, tens of thousands of times a year. Not clear what exactly went wrong, but this family from Spain that we have now confirmed is a husband who is an executive with a huge multinational corporation, Siemens, and his wife and 3 children were in the helicopter. They were in the middle of their flight for about 15 or so minutes, maybe a little bit more than that, when something went wrong. And again, we don't know the details of how it all transpired, but according to local officials, the NYPD, the FDNY, they were able to recover 4 bodies initially, then another 2. It was the NYPD that got the first 4, the FDNY that got the other 2, and then 2 people died in the hospital. 4 were declared deceased on scene. Look, Joe, we don't know whether or not it was exposure to the frigid waters behind me or the impact that actually caused their deaths, but just tragedy, once again, shaking the aviation community. If you look over my shoulder, it might be a little bit hard to see from this vantage point. You can still see a couple of lights out there, police lights that are flashing. It was just a cluster of ferries and marine units yesterday that were swarming the area. According to police, they were in the water within minutes of this all happening and did the best they could to try to save lives. It just wasn't possible. Lastly, I will leave you with this. The CEO of the helicopter company that runs those tours spoke with a number of publications, including The Telegraph, said that in his 30-plus years in the industry, he has never seen anything like this, that the pilot had actually phoned in to say they needed to get fuel. He said that process typically takes about 3 minutes. Instead, 20 minutes elapsed. He hadn't heard anything. He phoned his office and ultimately found out in Lower Manhattan that the crash had occurred. He said that everyone was devastated. Every single member of the company was devastated. His wife could not stop crying as you were looking right now at the loss of life of 6 people, the pilot, these 2 parents, their 3 children. There is nothing left to say except it is just beyond tragic. That's the latest here, New York on the West Side Highway, across the river from where this happened. Let me send it back to you.
All right, Sam, thank you so much. And we have another aviation incident to tell you about. A plane carrying several members of Congress was clipped by another aircraft while on the tarmac at Washington's Reagan National Airport. That happened yesterday. An American Airlines plane bound for JFK Airport carrying at least 6 House members from New York and New Jersey was clipped by the wings of another plane. No one was injured. This comes more than 2 months, of course, after an American Eagle jet and Black Hawk military helicopter collided in the air over Reagan Airport, killing all 67 people on board. A lot to talk about here. Let's bring in NBC News aviation analyst John Cox. John, always good to have you with us. Let's start with that deadly helicopter crash here in New York. We don't know many details yet, but we know weather didn't seem to be an issue around the time of the crash. There were occasional gusts of up to 21 miles an hour. Visibility was good, up to 10 miles. And the chopper just seemed to fall in pieces. What do you make of what we saw yesterday? Where will investigators begin?
I think the investigators are going to start looking at what caused the helicopter to come apart in flight. It's pretty clear from the videos that it suffered a catastrophic event, and that a good portion of the helicopters separated, the blades and others. So they're going to look for evidence in the wreckage that says, that can tell them what happened in what sequence. Once they have that, they can then begin to work backwards. But right now, everything's on the table, and the NTSB will work by eliminating things that are not contributing, such as the weather, as an example. If the weather was good, then they'll take that off. But slowly and very methodically, they'll go through and determine what the sequence of events was that led to this in-flight breakup.
So it is common to see helicopter tours over the Hudson River. Explain to us some of the challenges of flying through New York City airspace. What should we know about that? Are there any fears that it's getting too crowded up there?
There's a lot of traffic in New York, both airliners, corporate airplanes, and helicopters, but there are prescribed routes that everybody flies. So it's like being on a road. You drive on one side of the road and other vehicles pass on the other side. So the system works pretty well. There is a lot of traffic there. It's similar in quantity to Southern California or in the LA area. There's a lot of helicopter traffic there as well. So as far as crowding goes, I'm not sure that that's going to be an issue here. Certainly they will look at it, but it doesn't appear that this is a mid-air collision of any sort, unless it happened to be maybe a bird that the helicopter struck, resulting in a loss of control. So, but there's a lot of helicopters, but everybody who flies there knows the rules and they stick by them.
John, let's talk about that other incident involving the plane carrying members of Congress. It was clipped at Reagan Airport. We've seen incidents like this recently. So does this come down to communication between the crew and the tarmac and control towers, or is there something else at play here?
I think from what I've seen, Reagan National is a small airport. Consequently, when aircraft are lining up to depart, they're in very close proximity to each other. And there are lines on the pavement that show you where you line up. What happened here, NTSB is certainly going to look at to understand why these 2 aircraft got actually touched. But the pilots for both aircraft knew that something had happened. They returned to the gate to ensure that the aircraft were airworthy or not. And so the actions of the crew once the 2 aircraft touched was exactly what it should have been.
All right. John Cox, good to have you with us. Thank you so much. This morning, a Maryland father who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador is one step closer to coming home. Yesterday, the Supreme Court said the Trump administration must facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He was deported to El Salvador's mega prison last month, along with men the administration accused of being gang members. Immigration officials have called it an administrative error. The Supreme Court decision partly rejects an emergency request from the Justice Department. The DOJ was trying to contest a district judge order that had set a deadline for the man to be retrieved from prison by midnight Monday. Now, while immigration officials allege that Abrego Garcia has gang ties, he has never been charged with or convicted of a crime. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos is here to help break this one down for us. So the Supreme Court didn't exactly agree with the language used by the district judge. So what does their decision say about how all this should be carried out?
Yeah, I'm not so sure I read this as a win for Garcia. A true win would have been the court saying this was a huge mistake. Get him on a plane immediately. The president of El Salvador is going to be here Monday. Put him on that plane, and then we'll figure out who gets in trouble. Because the government the entire way admitted that he was deported in error. So I was not actually that surprised that the Supreme Court came back with this order, or that the lower court decision was allowed to stand. Here's where the devil is in the details. I think the administration is going to parlay this in their minds into a win. Here's why. Number one, the order says you have to try to facilitate his return so he can follow the proper procedure. The proper procedure could still end with his removal. Remember, the 2019 immigration judge order only said you can't send him back to El Salvador. It didn't say you can't send him to Namibia. It didn't say you can't send him to Luxembourg. Any of the other 193 countries might be fine under that order. And part two, the Supreme Court even said that in requiring them to effectuate his return, we don't even know if that's within the district court's power because you didn't define what effectuate means. I promise you the administration is going to turn this into whatever the district court defines effectuate as. The administration will say, you don't have the power to order us to do that because that's international relations.
So what do you think could happen next? I mean, this Monday deadline has already come and gone. When could Abrego Garcia come back to the U.S.?
My prediction, not soon, because it goes back to the district court, and the district court now has to define what it means by effectuate. That will take time. Once it does that, the administration will say, hey, district court, your definition of effectuate, we think you've overstepped your boundaries. Appeal time. That will take time. It will go up, maybe back to the Supreme Court to decide the issue of whatever the district court decided. And then it could ping pong back down to the district court to further clarify what it means to effectuate his return. All in all, this could take much longer than anticipated. And it's entirely possible with this Supreme Court order that ultimately whatever the district court orders to effectuate his return is not enough, that the district court may not even have the power to order the administration to do that. So I'm not so sure this is a win for Garcia, and I'm not so sure it means he's going to be back here in the States anytime soon.
So a bigger picture, the administration has been deporting people under the Alien Enemies Act. That's a wartime law from 1798, allows the president to deport people from, quote, enemy nations. Earlier this week, the Supreme Court essentially said that was okay as long as people are given due process. So together, these rulings might make it seem easier for people to challenge these. But what's the reality for people who've actually been deported without any sort of due process?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because there were two court decisions in the last week, and taken together as a kind of mini constellation, they may mean that these folks who are being removed are entitled to due process. That means notice and an opportunity to be heard. But lawyers will tell you that just getting that procedural due process certainly doesn't mean you're going to win. In fact, the Supreme Court, in the language that talks about facilitating return, seems to imply that, look, you may be able to remove these people. You just have to follow procedural due process. So the end result may be the same. The time may be extended. And I hate to sound so negative, but that may be the ultimate holding here when all the smoke clears, that the administration can still deport Garcia, can still deport everybody else, and look for them to give some minimal due process in the actual process.
A lot of questions still left.
A lot of questions.
All right,
yep.
Danny, thank you so much. Appreciate it. In the Los Angeles courtroom this morning, the effort to free Lyle and Eric Menendez will enter a new phase more than 30 years after the murder of their parents shocked the nation. The brothers will appear before a judge who is considering whether to re-sentence them. Some family members are pushing for their release, but others, including the LA District Attorney, say they still have not taken full responsibility. NBC News correspondent Jay Gray joins us now from outside the courthouse in Van Nuys, California. Jay, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. As we all know, this case has been the subject of TV, movies, documentaries, intense debate. Today, the legal drama again playing out in front of a judge, as you talk about. He'll determine if Eric and Lyle Menendez, currently serving a life sentence with no chance at parole, could ultimately get a chance at freedom. Inside the Van Nuys courthouse today, the latest in the legal, political, and for many moral tug-of-war over Lyle and Eric Menendez. A hearing to consider if the brothers, convicted of brutally killing their parents more than 35 years ago, should be granted a resentencing hearing and ultimately released. The motion, initiated by a former Los Angeles district attorney, is not supported by the current LADA, who believes the brothers haven't acknowledged lies they initially told investigators or taken full responsibility for the murders.
They do not meet the standards for resentencing. They pose an unreasonable risk of danger to the community.
Why are we here? Justice! Why are we here? Justice!
The Menendez family and supporters continue to push for their freedom.
We are not asking for sympathy. We are demanding fairness.
Arguing the brothers acted in self-defense after years of abuse by their father. Accusations outlined in multiple television movies and series about the case.
It really did actually move a lot of people to understand the childhood trauma that Eric and I suffered.
Family members also point to their work in prison, earning college degrees, creating hospice and mentoring programs, as well as a program for inmates who are victims of sexual abuse.
They have done more good from inside of a prison than most people do in their lifetime.
The question the courts now begin to answer is if Lyle and Eric Menendez will spend the rest of their lifetime behind bars. Now, there is another avenue to freedom for the Menendez brothers. California Governor Gavin Newsom has initiated a parole board review of the case as part of his process to consider commuting their sentences. Joe?
So, Jay, what exactly is that process, and when could we have answers on both of these efforts?
Yeah, I think today and in this hearing that we'll have a bit later in the day here, we should get some kind of answer today. There's even the possibility they could roll right into a resentencing hearing, though most don't believe that will be the case, that it will be scheduled for a later date. As for the commutation, they're right now involved in that 90-day interview and investigation process. The major question, according to the governor's office, is whether the Menendez brothers, and I'm quoting here, pose an unreasonable risk to the public. So they'll continue to review all of that, interview people. There is a hearing set for June 13th before the parole board, separate hearings for the brothers, and that will determine, the parole board will decide if the clemency hearing moves forward.
All right, Jay Gray in California. Jay, thank you. After a week of chilly temperatures, now heavy rain is expected across the East Coast this weekend, with even snow possible. Let's take a look at your morning news now weather with Angie Lassman. Snow.
Joe, I just know what you were thinking, and it's the same thing I'm thinking. What the heck? It is April. Why are we talking about snow across parts of the Northeast? Unfortunately, we had that chilly air in place, and we've got some moisture to tap into. So it's rain and a bit of snow, wet snow that is, for parts of this region. So let's get you going with what we've got out there right now. Your satellite and radar showing kind of a busy morning in a couple of spots across parts of the mid-Atlantic and stretching out into the Appalachians. We've got some of that rain, a mix of some rain and snow for places like Boston, stretching up into Maine and back towards parts of New York. We've got a little bit of a kind of couple of days of this rain and snow that we're going to have to deal with. Today is one of those days. You can see much of that moisture working into this region. So a good soaking rain is what you can expect from the mid-Atlantic to the Northeast today. This will bring us potentially some isolated flooding. It'll be minor, not all that widespread, but we could see some of that across this region. Then this area of low pressure kind of sits just offshore and ushers in more of this rain and a little bit of that lingering moisture for tomorrow across the mid-Atlantic. By Sunday, most of the showers will be focus closer to the coast. So that's the good news there. We'll start to see some improvements. In the meantime, flash flood outlook today does include a marginal risk for Washington, D.C., Roanoke, Raleigh, with all of that moisture working through. And by the time we get to tonight, we could pick up a couple of inches. Not crazy amounts of rain across this region, but Washington, D.C., maybe an inch, Richmond, an inch or two, about a half of an inch expected for New York when it's all said and done. And on top of that, we've got the snow that we're tracking. It's going to be the wet snow in those higher elevations, I think upwards of 4, maybe 5 inches as we get through tonight. Big picture look at the country when it comes to temperatures. Boy, we've got 2 different stories happening. East Coast running cooler than normal, and then the West Coast, who turned up the heat. We've got 100 degrees expected in Phoenix today, running 10, 15, even close to 25 degrees above normal for much of this region. We'll see the potential for some of those record highs, and we keep that warmth going even into tomorrow. More record highs likely across the Southwest. Parts of the plains will see temperatures into the 70s, but we've got 90s on tap for parts of Texas, triple digits for Phoenix. And then, Joe, this is what you want to see, isn't it? Some 70s as we get started next week across parts of the East. So we'll get some more spring-like temperatures for our friends in that region.
That's good. So 100 degrees or snow, which
yeah,
do you
what
pick?
Do you choose?
Which one do you want?
At this point in April, I'm going with 100 degrees. I need a tan.
It's a dry heat. It's a dry heat, right?
It's a dry heat,
All
they
right.
say.
Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.